Hey, I'm Bob at ILikeToMakeStuff. Today on Maker101, we're going to talk about the Arduino. Okay, so what is an Arduino? Well, Arduino is actually the name of a company, but the thing that they produce are these microcontrollers, and they're just often called Arduino boards. But each one of these boards actually has a different model name. This one is the most common one, the one that you'll probably see around the most, and it's called the Arduino Uno. All the different models that they have just have different functionality to them. Some of them have onboard Wi-Fi, some of them have Bluetooth, some of them have stronger processors, more inputs and outputs, a bunch of different variations that make up the different models. But like I said, this is the one that you'll see the most often. So what is a microcontroller? Well, in this case, it's a small computer processor mounted on a board with a bunch of other components that handle the input and the output. And the purpose of that is to make it easier for you to connect the physical world around you to the digital world. You could also do that with your home computer, but it's a little more difficult because you don't have access to all the inputs and the outputs that you might want. For example, on your home computer, you have a mouse and a keyboard and a camera. Those are inputs that you can do something to send some information into the computer. Now, the computer does some processing on that, and then it sends an output. That output can be video to your monitor, sound to your speakers, or something to a printer, but you're pretty limited as to what those inputs and outputs are. So on the microcontroller, you can have any input that you want, a button or a slider or a photo sensor, anything, send some information in. Then the onboard processor manipulates and processes the data and decides what to do with it. Then it can send some information through the outputs to whatever devices you want. You could control a motor or a light or really anything else, and that's the beauty of the microcontrollers, is that they're open-ended on the front end and the back end, so you can have any inputs controlling any outputs. So how do you actually control the board? Well, most of them have a USB port on them so that you can connect them to your PC. Once it's connected to your PC, you write some code. You use a development environment from Arduino to send that code through the USB to the board. Now that code is going to stay on this chip until you replace it, and so then anytime you power this on, the code that's on there is going to run in a cycle. Now I'm not going to talk about that code in this video. We'll do another one on that in the future because it's a little bit bigger of a process to get the understanding of how the code works. I really just wanted to talk about how the hardware works in this case. So let's talk a little bit more about the components that are on the board. On this Uno, it has 14 digital inputs and outputs, or I/O, on this side. And it has 6 analog ends on this side, which you can switch to digital if you need to. So what's the difference between digital and analog inputs? Well, to put it very simply, digital things are either on or off. They're binary. They're 1 or 0, whereas an analog thing is a range of values. For example, the temperature in this room is analog. It is 1 degree of a whole bunch of possible different degrees, whereas the lights in this room are either on or off. So how would that translate to a board? Well, you would use an on or off type thing for a button, because a button has 2 states. If you had a knob and you wanted to show whether it was all the way down, somewhere in the middle, or all the way up, that would be more of an analog input. So very simply, you would use those 2 types of inputs and outputs to handle those 2 types of things. Something that was either on or off, or had a specific value. Those digital and analog inputs are how you attach other devices to the Arduino. And using these header pins, you actually just plug in the components that you want to use as those devices. But there's a whole system that actually makes that even easier to do, and they're called shields. On the Arduino, there's a common shield interface, and it's just the layout of these pins is replicated on the shields that you can buy so that they can snap together. And what are the shields? Well, they are added functionality. They can have their own microcontrollers on them, or they can just be hardwired inputs and outputs that do different things. And by snapping these 2 things together, you're actually adding the functionality of the shield to the processing of the Arduino in the bottom. And since they have a common shield interface, most of the shields have male pins on the bottom and female on the top, so you can actually stack more and more shields on top to add functionality. You can get shields that add GPS functionality, or Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, an LCD screen. This one, for instance, is a relay shield. And this allows you to control high voltage electronics, which otherwise would just be too much voltage for the Arduino itself. This one actually lets you really easily plug in about 6 servos and control them from the Arduino. So like I said before, the Arduino is a brand name, but the cool thing about the brand Arduino is that they've open sourced the design of their boards. So if you were inclined, you could go get this design, buy all of these components, make your own, and sell them under a different name. And actually that's happened a whole lot. There's a lot of companies that are producing their own boards that are based on this design. You can usually tell that they're compatible because they have names with Duino in them, like Seedduino or NetDuino or FreeDuino. There's a whole bunch of them, and usually they work really well with the original Arduinos. So I'm going to add a bunch of resources for you down in the description. One is going to be a list of all the different models that are available for this, and it's actually a really cool chart because you can see what the different functionality is between the different boards. It's really handy if you're trying to build a specific project. I'll also add links to the Arduino site where they have tons of different examples, and really you won't have any trouble finding more information about the Arduino if you just search for it on Google or on YouTube. There are tons and tons of resources about this because it's such an easy platform to get started on. In the future, I'll also do a video about writing some code for the Arduino to give you an idea of how it works. It's not very complicated overall, but it is a little intimidating just to look at for the first time. So we'll try to walk through what's involved in writing some basic code next time. So if you didn't know anything about Arduino before this video, I hope this answered at least a few of the questions and gave you some interest so that you can go find out some more information on your own. I've got some other Maker 101 videos as well as a bunch of project videos you might be interested in. And as always, I love seeing what you guys are working on. You can post that on my Facebook page or tag me on Instagram or Twitter. I love seeing that stuff, so please continue to do that. If you want to support these videos, Patreon is the best way to do that. You can click the link to find out more. That's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.